Song is striding away still as they run up towards the finish. Song gives Ruby Walsh his first winner by a comfortable fight.
It's Papillon holding on with 50 yards left to go, and Papillon wins the Martel Grand National. But it's Cordo Star, Ruby Walsh, one last fence to go. He sometimes makes a mistake, but not today.
It's Hurricane Fly, leads by 2. Hurricane Fly driven out to the line. Can he regain his title? He can.
Heading down towards the last flight in the champion hurdle. This year she jumped it perfectly. The super sub Annie Power has won the Stan James champion hurdle.
Mccoy from album photo, who's giving it everything, but Mccoy will win it.
I'm here with recently retired 12-time Irish champion jockey Ruby Walsh, who in a glittering 24-year career in the saddle rode over 2,500 winners, which included 59 at the Cheltenham Festival. Ruby, if I can take you back to the very start of this long and winding road, I guess there was probably never much chance of you being anything other than a jockey, because there's a great family background in the sport. We all know your father, Ted, but just tell us a little bit more about the family history, because it goes back a good bit further than that. Your grandfather obviously is the man whose name you took, I think, in the end.
He is, yeah. Obviously my grandfather was Ruby. Himself and his brother Ted, where my dad got his name, they emigrated to America in the late 50s, but when they came back, my grandfather started training in the Phoenix Park, and they moved out to Kill, which is home for me now, but my grandfather always trained there. Well, they were trainers as much as trainers in the beginning. They were turning horses over to make a living, but you know, Dad was born there, or Dad was born in Cork, but they moved there when he was sort of 7 or 8 to Kill, and that's been home ever since. But my grandfather trained, and when he passed away on New Year's Day in '91, Dad took over the licence. But our house was one side of the yard, my grandparents' house was the other side of the yard, so I never knew a life that didn't have horses in it. Now, to say I was always going to be a jockey, it was never forced upon me. I never had to do it, but I always rode, and it was always the dream.
You mentioned your dad there. I mean, what are your early memories of him riding? Can you remember some of his big days before he hung up his boots and before he started the training?
Yeah, like, people remember Gold Cup Day in '86 for Dawn Run. I remember for Attitude Adjuster winning the Fox Hunters. That's what springs to my mind. I can remember sitting in the house in Kill, watching him win on Attitude Adjuster, and he ringing home to tell my mother he was going to retire, but or stop riding over fences anyway. But I remember him riding the bumpers. Attitude Adjuster was the first memory I have of him riding, winning a point on him in Patrickswell and Limerick, where the Limerick racecourse is now. He won a point on him there, and when we were winning a Hunter's Chase on him in Thurles, and winning the Fox Hunters in Cheltenham. But that are my earliest memories of Dad riding.
And Cheltenham, we all know how big it is these days. Was that every bit as important back then? Did you kind of feel that sense of importance when he rode winners there?
I can remember him riding Attitude Adjuster. I was 7. Did I understand the importance of it? Probably not. Like he'd won a champion chase in '79 on Hilly Way. He rode 4 winners there, but no, I'd say I was a bit older before I realised just how big Cheltenham is, or how important it is in the season. I suppose you have to get a bit more mature to understand that, but you know, I can remember in '89 like watching all the Irish horses and only Galmoy winning, and in the early '90s the sporadic success that Irish horses had in Cheltenham. I never thought it would get to where it is now, but like I can remember the importance of it. And even growing up, like watching the Grand National, Irish horses didn't compete. Like when I was born in '79, Lescargo won the National. The next Irish horse to be competitive in the National was when Bobby Joe won it in '99. So all my years growing up, Irish horses weren't as dominant as they are now.
I know you had an interest in other sports though growing up, didn't you? Rugby, athletics, for example. Did it ever even cross your mind that that might be something you'd like to pursue more seriously?
I don't think so. I was never fast enough to consider a career in athletics. I was a bit of a stayer, but I was never quite good enough. I played a lot of football, but again, that was amateur. And rugby, when I was growing up, rugby was brilliant, but it was an amateur sport. It only became professional well after I'd stopped playing rugby. But I suppose when I was sort of 16, I started riding. I could see a career in racing where there was no real career in rugby or GAA. So maybe But I wouldn't have been good enough anyway, Gary. I was, it was tough, but I wasn't the most talented in the world.
And what about at school? Because we hear these days a lot about the importance of jockeys finishing school, getting an education before they go on to a career in the saddle. Was that something that you were keen to do, or did you require a little bit of persuasion maybe?
I'd say it required plenty of persuasion, but it was no, as my mother always said, it would be no cross to carry, or burden to carry even, or cross to bear. And she was right. I mean, I was lucky enough to be champion amateur while I was still at school, and that was a fair bit of commitment from my parents to, get me out of school to go racing or drop me to school late if I was riding work and things like that. But no, it was definitely finishing school was not the be all and end all. It was a big help.
And I think you were actually riding, weren't you, on the track while doing your leaving cert? There's a story, I don't know whether it's true or not, that you switched from honours to ordinary levels, so you could ride in the evening on one subject. What was that?
Accountancy, and a Thursday afternoon, or Wednesday afternoon actually. I don't know why it was in such a rush. Like I'd say the bumper in Leopardstown probably wasn't until 8 o'clock anyway, but I remember going in to take the accountancy exam and thinking the result's not really going to matter. So I just took the ordinary paper and was out in an hour.
And how did Leopardstown go that night?
I rode 3 winners during my leaving cert anyway. I don't know what was one of them in Leopardstown, but I did ride 3 winners that 10 days when my exams were on.
Those early days starting out as a jockey, what was it like? Did you find it hard going, or was this something that you loved and immediately didn't feel like work at all?
It never felt like work. It was always an adventure. It was a dream. Like when I started riding, I had my first ride in Leopardstown on Wild Irish. In May, I rode a winner in July on Siren Song in Goran Park. He then went and won at the Galway Festival. He won the winner's bumper on the Saturday. So yeah, I had success early. The first season I was riding, I rode 8 winners I think as an amateur. And then the following year, Willie retired. And I started riding a good few of Willie's bumper horses, and I ended up champion amateur the second year. I rode 34 winners while I was still in school. And then when I left school, I went to work in Willie's as soon as I left. Finished my exams, I started in Willie's the following day. I'd been there the summer before, and I rode 40 odd winners that year, 44 I think. And then I had to make a decision whether I was going to turn professional or not. And I suppose Dad was instrumental in that, and Willie was as well. And there was a fair bit of thought put into it. I was the same size then as an 18-year-old as I am now, and would I be able to maintain my weight and things like that. But they were both thought it would be a good idea to turn professional, and I'm glad I did.
And was it always going to be National Hunt? Was there ever a question that you might be light enough to be a flat jockey, or were you even interested?
I was, yeah. I worked in Ballydoyle for a summer when Aidan started there. I was 16, but I was 9'7" when I was 16, and today I retired at 40. I was 9 stone 12, so I was never going to be a flat jockey. I was too big from the word go, but I never got any bigger.
And starting off around that time, I mean, who were your idols? Who were the people you looked up to and thought, that's the guy I want to be?
Richard Dunwoody, always growing up. He was completely an idol, the style, the way he rode. To look at him on television, watching it on a Saturday on the old BBC and watching Ascot, and like it was Richard Dunwoody was the one. But as I got older and started going racing more, I used to really admire Charlie. I thought Charlie Swan had, tactically was incredible what he could do, and even riding horses for Dad and different people, how he would change tactics, and even how he would address owners when he came back in after a race. To me, Charlie was a genius at that.
I think, was it the first year we were champion jockey, was that around about the time Charlie had hung up his boots?
He stopped riding. I think I rode in one chase with Charlie in Dundalk. But yeah, the first year I was professional, Charlie he hadn't retired, but he definitely scaled back a huge amount.
And what was that like, actually being out on the track with a guy you looked up to in your formative years?
I'm sure they were all there. There was Charlie Swan, Brendan Sheridan, Conrad Dwyer, Norman Williamson, Richard Dunwoody was at the tail end. But yeah, they were your idols, and here you were in the wearing with them, hoping to talk to you. To ride with them was incredible. But they were brilliant. They were brilliant teachers as well. They didn't bully younger jockeys, but they taught them what was right and what was wrong. They were really good people.
And can you remember what sort of feedback you were getting in those early days? I mean, I remember from going racing, you were getting rave reviews from early on. Obviously, the family background had a little bit to do with that as well. But did you feel in your own mind, without maybe necessarily being arrogant about it, that you had what it took to make this?
I don't think I ever thought that, and I don't think I ever considered it. I was always working to get better, to chase a dream. I never set out with a target. I only look at it and think back now, but I didn't set out at 18 thinking I want to be champion jockey or I want to achieve X or Y. Because I was always in racing, I knew how much luck you would need to achieve any of that. So I just took one day at a time and kept chasing the dream. It was always to improve your skills, and you know, I got very lucky to come across some wonderful horses, but I was chasing a dream and it never turned into reality. It was always a dream, but there was never targets. I never really said I wanted to achieve X or Y. I just kept chasing the dream.
Mm. The link up with Willie Mullins obviously is a hugely important part of what you went on to achieve. I mean, how important was it to almost get in on the ground floor with Willie? He hadn't been training for that long when you linked up with him, and it was of course the time of the Celtic Tiger in Ireland, wasn't it? He was beginning to grow. There were some big owners around. I mean, traditionally a lot of the best Irish horses you'd remember as well as I would, that they went to England, didn't they?
They did. Even as a kid, I remember when Dad had Danny Harrell as a bumper horse, like Jenny Pittman came and bought him, and that was just normal. He was sold off to England, and you know, it was, I suppose the Celtic Tiger did come and time changed, and I suppose I got in Willie's, he was coming to the end of his riding career. The second ride I had, he actually beat me half a length in a bumper in Tipperary, and then I ended up getting to ride one for him in the stole. He could in an amateur handicap with 9:13 or something, and then the second ride I had for him, he turned up in Leopardstown one day and he couldn't do the weight in the bumper, and he rang Dad. I was at home riding ponies. I went to Leopardstown to ride a mare called Young Fenora, and she ended up winning, and the rest was history. But that's the kind of a lucky break you get. I lived 40 minutes from Leopardstown, so like 2 hours before the race, when Willie couldn't do the weight, I was close enough to get there and ride her. And you know, that's, you're talking about you being in the right place at the right time. That was definitely the right place at the right time for me.
Speaking about lucky breaks, in I think it was 99, 2000, you had a couple of unlucky breaks, didn't you? Because a broken leg at the Pardubice fixture in the Czech Republic. I think you might have maybe done the same thing again, didn't you? But then, after all that frustration, I guess you were very frustrated that season to win the Grand National on Papillon. That was a huge moment in your career, wasn't it?
Massive. Like when I turned professional in 98, 99 season, I was champion jockey, and like it was fantasy stuff. And I just thought this game was so simple. And I broke my collarbone then in September in Dundalk. I was leading the championship again, and I broke my collarbone in Dundalk. Then I went to the park, just got back to riding the Pardubice, broke my leg. Was just back riding after Christmas, got a fall schooling, and didn't, I suppose technically, yeah, I did break it, but I didn't smash it again. It opened on the edge.
I mean, looking back at that now, I mean, was that a good thing in a way? I mean, was it a reality check for you?
It was some reality check. It was some reality check. I don't know, is getting injured ever good for anybody, but it was definitely a reality check. You realise that this game is not simple. And went to Cheltenham. I'd won the Cheltenham bumper 2 years before. I'd had no winner there in my first year as a professional. Went back the second year. I didn't even have that many rides. And you know, when you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And it doesn't matter who you are or what you achieve. When you get injured and you're out of sight, it takes time to get going again. I remember going to entry. Dad was lining Papillon up at the Grand National, and he ran well in a hurdle race in Leopardstown. Going to entry, but he was the only ride I had at the whole meeting, and like,
and that wasn't by choice.
No, I'm damn sure right, it wasn't by choice. I couldn't get a ride, and I had Papillon in the Grand National, and he went and won. It was the best day I ever had in racing, but it put me back on the map, and it changed my whole career. I mean, 2 weeks later, Comanche Goat won the Irish National. A fortnight after that, he won the Heineken Gold Cup in Punchestown, and things were just flying again.
I mean, the exposure that goes with winning a Grand National, it's scarcely credible, isn't it? I mean, we'll talk about the Paul Nicholls link-up shortly, but how much do you think that did for your career as a whole? I mean, how much of a turning point was that?
It was the turning point. Like I couldn't believe the aftermath of the Grand National. As I said earlier, like when I was growing up, Irish horses didn't compete in the Grand National. Like you were looking at it wondering how many would get to Beecher's first time. And then Bobby Joe won it in 99, Papillon won it in 2000, Monty's Pass won it shortly after. But like to get up on that Sunday morning at home and to be splashed across the front of all the Sunday newspapers, you're thinking like, my God. And the crowd of people that were in the village in Kill, and the television crews and cameras, and it was like something none of us had ever experienced. And it was phenomenal. And that just propelled you into a different league.
I mean, the list of Irish jockeys who've gone to Britain to seek better opportunities over the years is endless, to prove themselves, if you like. I mean, had that ever entered your mind when you were sitting on the sidelines that season with a broken leg? Was that ever something that crossed your mind that you might fancy a go heading over to England for more opportunities?
It didn't really, because I was lucky in that Willie's yard was growing. Frances Crowley, I was riding a lot for Frances Crowley at the time as well. She had a huge yard as well. So between the two of them, I had sort of 150, 60 horses as a core base to ride. So I didn't, as such, need to go to England. The prize money was very good in Ireland. I was earning a good living, and it wasn't the relentlessness of the UK.
Was that something that always was at the back of your mind, that you wouldn't necessarily have fancied that day to day on the hamster wheel, so to speak?
I don't know, but I suppose, like, when with Richard Dunwoody being someone I looked up to as an idol, and listening to him talk about getting off the conveyor belt and starting to commute and ride in Ireland and riding more to better races, not riding every day, how that helped him. I did look and learn from other people, so the relentlessness of it didn't appeal to me. Now, I know I ended up doing it quite a bit, but and as the opportunities arose, but no, it didn't. England didn't, as a full-time base, didn't hugely appeal to me.
Well, that brings us nicely on to the link-up with Paul Nicholls, which came about not long after that. I mean, what was the catalyst for that? Who made the first move there? How did you get wind of the opportunity?
Well, Dad had always been, he trained for Paul Barber in the past and always knew Paul Barber. So there was a connection there. You know, when Paul Nicholls offered me the job, I didn't take the job as such. I said to him, look, I don't really want to leave Ireland. What I can do is ride Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for you. I want to be in Ireland on the Thursday. I can ride Friday and Saturday, and I'll be in Ireland on the Sunday. And it kind of just started as that. There was no contract. It just started as a gentleman's agreement, and that's the way it continued. And I suppose that was probably Dad's idea. It took a bit of organising, which Jennifer basically did, and it worked. But it was, you were juggling a lot of balls, but there was no job. Are you available these days? And that's what I can do, and that's the way it worked.
Mm-hmm. Two very different men, as we know, both extremely driven though. I mean, how did you find it riding for Paul, say during the week and on a Saturday, and then coming back to ride for Willie on a Sunday? Could you kind of have a little laugh to yourself at the contrast, but of two brilliant trainers, but the contrast between them? Yeah,
they were two different guys. They trained very differently. They wanted their horses ridden a little bit differently. But they were both extremely successful. But the beauty of it was, for me, that when Paul's horses might go off form, I could go home on Sunday and ride 2 or 3 winners for Willie. It was never my fault. And vice versa, I could ride 3 for Paul on a Saturday and Willie's might get beat on the Sunday. You couldn't say the jockey was out of form. So I was able to juggle 2 yards on 2 different sides of the sea, but because they'd never seemed to run hot together or cold together, they always seemed to run opposite each other, which was a huge help. But I loved it, but I got to ride brilliant horses. I mean, the first year I was with Paul, Azertiop went chasing, and that was a dream start. He won the Arkle, and we never really looked back.
I mean, it's interesting what you say there about really enjoying and embracing it. I mean, a lot of people from the outside looking in would think maybe this is a young guy, he's got to be feeling pressure here on these big occasions. But I guess no matter what sport it is, footballers playing in a cup final, golfers in a major, they're the occasions you want to be part of. Did you kind of thrive on that?
I suppose I did, but I remember riding Papillon and Dad taking all the pressure off me. Like, he was being back from 40s all the way down. He was only gone 10-1 favourite, and legging me up on him in the parade ring. And he just said, "So you know what you're going to do? Just ride him like the horseman you are." And there was no pressure. And then he went and won, and you realise, like, if you actually enjoy this rather than worry about it, that's the best way of dealing with pressure. And that's the way I always went about it. Now, there was times, like anybody, of course you were under pressure, and there was days things didn't go right and they hurt, but the more, I suppose, the older I got and the more experience I got, the more I realised that the Supreme Novices is a 2-mile novice hurdle. There may be 50, 60, 70,000 people up there watching it, and God knows how many on television, but the crux of the race is, it's still the same race that's run in October, November, March. It's a 2-mile novice hurdle. Putting the title on it adds the pressure, but take the title off it and that's all it is. Champion hurdle is a 2 mile conditioned hurdle. So I would remove those things and just think about the actual, what the race was. And that's how I dealt with pressure.
I mean, we're not here today to necessarily discuss individual horses, but I think it would be remiss of us not to mention Cauto Star, because he was the defining horse of your time with Paul, wasn't he? I mean, what in your view, and I know you've been asked this countless times, but what was it that set him apart? Was it his versatility, his brilliance?
Yeah, I remember going to Haydock to ride him in the Betfair chase and thinking, if this horse stays, he's just different. Like, he had been favourite in the champion chase the year before. He'd fallen, he'd won a Tingle Creek on him, he'd gone and won in the Old Roan. But he turned up in Haydock that day, in the old Haydock on the outside chase course. And like, he came down the straight like doing a hat canter. Like, he stayed forever. He'd speed for 2 miles and the stamina for 3 1/4. He was just incredible. Like, there was no, and I think even in his early days, when he had that speed, he was a little bit better than he probably was at the end, where he had more stamina and resolution. But like, the first year he won the Old Roan, the Betfair, the Tingle Creek, he'd go from 3 miles and head up, drop back and win the Tingle Creek. But not just to win it, to have it won at the pond fence. Like, you're steadying him up, he's gone by Viper or Steadies, and you're only a matter of getting him home. And then go back up to the King George, he won the Aon and rounded up in the Gold Cup. Like, that was phenomenal. It was great to be part of it. He was a pleasure to be part of him, but he was an incredible racehorse.
I mean, for people who watch and enjoy the sport, when a horse like him comes along, the tendency is almost always to compare him to the greats of yesteryear, and even since then we've had some really good horses too. And of course Denman was around at the same time in the very same yard. What's your feeling about that whole thing? I mean, Messi and Ronaldo get compared to the greats of the past as well.
I think it's unfair.
Is it unfair?
I think it is, to compare horses from other generations. Now, that's what makes sport so interesting, because that's what the debate will be. Was he as good as him, or, which is better, Faheen or Hurricane Fly, Denman or Cauto Star? I don't honestly know what the answer is, but that's what the debate is. Like, to me, Cauto was just incredible for, like Hurricane Fly, for their durability. Like, Cauto ran in 6 King Georges. Hurricane Fly won 5 Irish champion hurdles. It was just the pure durability of them. Big Bucks, Quiviga. It's those horses that can keep coming back and keep coming back. You have one-hit wonders, and horses do things that are spectacular, but they only do it once. It was those, Cauto just kept doing it. Hurricane Fly kept doing it. Big Bucks, Quiviga. They were incredible horses, like, just year on year. I think that's what made them so good.
And as well as all those big winners for Paul Nicholls, Willie Mullins, you were picking up some good outside rides as well. I mean, I go back to Mick Canam when he was the go-to man on the flat. Did you almost, when he was riding ARC winners for the likes of Michael Jarvis, did you almost feel the National Hunt equivalent of that when you were at your absolute height there?
I don't know if I ever felt that, but obviously when you're riding winners, people want you. I was lucky enough to ride a couple of big winners for Colin Murphy. I won an Irish National for Martin Brazel. I won a Prix Alan de Brie for Eric McNamara. I had a lot of winners for Tony Martin. I won a Scottish National for Martin Pipe. Yeah, I did get good spares. I even got on Marlborough in a racing post chase for Nicky Henderson. But because of my association with Willie and Paul, they tended to have runners in most of the big races. So whilst people might be looking for you, you were probably never really able to commit to too much more than the horses they had. And thankfully, they had most of the good horses.
I mean, some of those horses you mentioned there, you might have been standing in for someone with an injury or whatever, but other occasions, just the same, you might have been taking over from the horse's regular rider. I mean, what's that like for a jockey? I guess you can't feel any sense of guilt about someone being jocked off a horse in favour of you. I doubt it happened to you too much over your career, but no, what is it like being on the other end of it?
It did happen, and that's sport. It's like getting dropped off a team. It does happen. It's never a nice feeling. It didn't happen to me too often, thankfully, but it did happen to me. And you just have to deal with it. Now, you're probably the wrong fella to be giving advice on it, because it didn't happen to me often enough, but that is the reality, that it's professional. People are going to want to change, and to me, when I did get jocked off, I took the approach that I'll prove you wrong. You'll regret that. That was my attitude that I went about it. And even when I might get beaten on a horse, or a horse would fall, or whatever would go wrong, my attitude was just prove them wrong, prove people wrong.
And during your peak, if you like, and basically throughout the whole length of your career, your, I suppose, opposite number across the water was AP Mccoy, of course, who towered above his contemporaries in Britain during his whole career, 20-time champion jockey, basically had a stranglehold on that from the word go. I mean, some people like to put this down as something sort of a rivalry, but the truth of the matter is you guys were great friends. Fierce rivals, yes, on the track, but I think you stayed with AP a fair bit when you went to Britain, didn't you?
I did. Himself and Chanel were incredible to me, to myself and Gillian. And yeah, there was never an inch given on the track, but there wasn't an inch expected either. I think people look for rivalries within sport, look for people not to like each other. Like we had it a couple of weeks ago with Rory McIlroy and Brooks Koepka. They're competitors on the golf course, but they'll probably get on off the golf course. You know, people, to be competitors in sport doesn't mean you don't have to dislike them. You have to compete against them to beat them in the sport, but you should be able to walk off and shake their hand and go for a drink with them. That's what always happened in rugby. It's what does happen in racing. It's, you know, yeah, I wanted to be as good as AP. I wanted to beat AP as much as I could. But I still admired him and I enjoyed his company and I considered him a very good friend. And I was lucky to be in a generation of what I considered brilliant riders. I came along just behind Paul Carberry, but at the very same time as Barry Geraghty. And, you know, between the three of us, we dominated Irish racing for a long time. And Davy Russell came along, who was an amateur, but was the same age as us. And then with the influx of Jigginstown, I think we were, you know, four very good riders riding at the same time.
Was being involved in a tight finish with Mccoy different from other jockeys? I mean, I know you, when you were riding, would often scan down the field and see who you were up against in a particular race. I guess he was the name you didn't want to see in there, was he?
No, I not so much didn't want to see, but like there was very little in the difference of AP or Barry or Davy or Paul. They rode differently, or Dickie as well for that matter, and Chalk. There was a lot of brilliant riders. AP was incredibly strong, but AP was incredibly deceptive as well in how he was going. He the more I rode with him, the more I learned that, by the way, he's not actually off the bridle at all. Like, he'd make it look like he was off the bridle, but he wouldn't be. He had a great way of making the horse look like it was flat to the boards, and all of a sudden you go to challenge him and his horse would find more because his body language would change. You could almost feel the intensity that he was only then picking the horse up. So you had to learn how guys rode and learn their body language on a horse to be able to decide, well, actually he's going well or he's not going well, or I might beat him, or how to beat them. So the more you rode with them, the more you could figure that out. But like AP he was phenomenal. His commitment, his desire, his strength, his bravery, he had everything. Like.
All those great horses, Paul Nicholls, Willie Mullins, and some of those outside yards we've spoken about, riding big winners day in, day out. How addictive is success like that for a jockey? Is it one of those things you kind of almost feel hard done by when you go to the races and don't ride a big one?
I don't think you feel hard done by, because I always felt that I was lucky to be riding them. So I never felt hard done by when I didn't ride a winner. But it is, and when you get to experience riding a winner at the Cheltenham Festival, yeah, it is addictive. You want to be there riding that winner, turning to the crowd, coming down that walkway, coming into that parade. It's an incredible feeling to have that sort of atmosphere and applause for, I suppose, you, but the horse you've ridden. It's probably as close as jockeys get to playing in packed stadiums, is that Cheltenham Festival feeling. And there was always something for me about riding a winner in front of a big crowd. I loved it. Leopardstown, Gorham Park on Thayester's Day, Newbury, Sandown on Tingle Creek Day. Like that atmosphere and noise, that I got a buzz off of that. I loved it. I loved even going down in front of the stand to the start of Tingle Creek and the place jammed, or the King George down the parade, like, and the noise and the atmosphere and the intensity of it. Like that, I loved it. It was a brilliant feeling.
All good things come to an end, obviously. That said, I think a lot of people were still very surprised when you decided to come back to Ireland full time and give up the link with Paul Nicholls. How long was that decision in the making, and how tough was it from your point of view to make?
It was trashed around this kitchen a fair bit. It was brilliant, and I loved riding Paul Nicholls' horses. They were so competitive, fit, good jumpers. I loved working for him, but I got tired of galloping out here on a Monday morning at 4:25 to get the 6:30 flight to Bristol. That just wears on you eventually. I did it for 10 years and I loved it, but you know, we'd had a great relationship, and we still have a good relationship. And to me, I wanted it to end with I wanted it to end well. So it was hard. It was to go and tell him that I didn't fancy the travelling anymore, and thanks very much. It wasn't easy, but is it easy to give your resignation to any job that you like? I can't imagine that it is. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but I felt it was better for me. I was 31 or 2. I was trying to get as long out of riding as I could. I loved it, and I wanted to extend that as long as I could, and I thought that was the right thing to do. It worked out well. Willie came across some good horses, but when you were sitting watching Sylvian Alcoconti winning the King George the following year, you were thinking, Jesus, what have I done? But I think it worked out in the long run.
In fairness, you've ridden some nice winners for Paul in the intervening period, I guess, as well, which
I was lucky. I won.
Proves there's no hard feelings.
No, and like I talk to him probably once a month. You know, and anytime I meet him at the races, I would stand and now have a drink with him. But no, I had great times, and they cheat. Paul Nicholls and his owners, they helped give me the career I had.
Did he make a real effort to get you to change your mind when you told him?
No.
No.
Like Willie, I think that is why they're successful. They know when your mind is made up that you're best let go. And it was the same with Paul as it would have been with Willie.
And Ruby, we've touched on some of the injuries you've had during your career there. It's part and parcel of life as a jump jockey, part and parcel for life as a jockey for most. I think you broke just about every bone in your body. I remember having a look at a diagram that was in one of the papers one time, but the one that stands out to me is when you lost your spleen. Was it in a fall at Cheltenham?
Yeah.
And we're back riding within a month, was it?
27 days.
27 days.
Yeah, it was the Paddy Power meeting, and I rode at the December meeting in Cheltenham then. They are 4 weeks apart. I rode on the Friday. So I lost on the Saturday, Pride of Dulcott in the handicap hurdle on the Saturday, the Paddy Power meeting, as it was then. And I got back to ride at the Friday 27 days later. But once your spleen was out, Gary, it was gone. It was, you know, there was obviously the incision where they had to go in and get it out, so you had to wait for that to heal. But once it was gone, it was gone. There was no recovery. You weren't waiting for a bone to fix. You weren't waiting for a muscle to you were basically waiting for the wound to heal and just to feel strong enough, and that's all it was. And
you're talking about it quite matter-of-factly there, but not necessarily everybody would see it in that light. I mean, what was it like for Gillian and those around you when that happened?
So Gillian was with me. I think you may ask her, poor woman. She was in the hospital with me, and I come back into the dressing room and I didn't feel well, and I went back into the ambulance room, and they called Gillian, and I had a woeful pain in my shoulder, but there was nothing wrong with my shoulder. And Sue Smith, who was the doctor, said that's a related pain. So she started poking around in my stomach, and she obviously stuck her hand into where my spleen was, and I'm sure which side it is. The scar's in the middle, so I'm not sure where it was. But she said, no, you've put me in an ambulance, sent me straight down to Cheltenham General. So I was in the A&E, and I was sitting there, I said, Gillian, I don't feel well. I don't feel well at all, and just good luck. Blacked out. So when I came back around, Gillian was standing there, and AP had appeared, wherever he had come from. And they were discussing my spleen, that my blood pressure had dropped, so I was obviously bleeding internally, and the doctor wanted to give it a couple of days to see if it would stop bleeding and start to heal itself. Give it 3 weeks actually, and then decide. So AP was advising him that was no good to me. That really, like, you should just take it out.
The Jockeys Union here.
Yeah, Jockeys Union, really, that needs to come out. Gillian was agreeing with him that they decided like actually waiting 3 weeks to then operate to be out for another 3 weeks. That's no good. So just take it out and we'll move on. So he was humming in hand. So I passed out again. So then they wheeled me down to theatre, but when he opened me up, it was in bits. So it was easy. It was an easy decision in the end. But yeah, AP was my AP.
He was your guardian angel.
AP and my wife were my consultants.
And 27 days, you said you made it back to the track. What was it? Remind me that had you rushing back, and was it worthwhile in the end? How long were the doctors advising you to stay off?
There was no protocol, I suppose. There was no.
It's not something you get every day, really.
Exactly. So there was no guidelines as such. What was I rushing back for? I couldn't tell you. Cheltenham. I was a jockey. I just wanted to get back. But to me, I admire the mentality of jockeys. It's always how quick can you fix it? How soon can I get back to work? It's never how long can I drag this out for? I admire that mentality. They don't want a sick note. They want to be fixed. And I think that's a great way to be in life.
And when you had an injury, obviously Gillian and your daughters now are growing up. They'll have been of an age where they'd understand what was going on, some of them in the latter part of your career. What was it like for them seeing you have a fall? I guess I remember you saying the thing was you'd always try and get up straight away when you, or at the very least sit up.
Yeah, that was always jumping into me, even as a kid. Like, if you get a fall, get up so people know you're all right. If you can get up, get up. And I always, if I could get up, got up straight away, because there's people watching, and I even see it here with the girls riding. If they get a fall, I'd be saying to the same, like, if you just get up, at least I know you're alive, you're okay. So I always got up, and then if I got up and went back down, you knew there was something wrong, or if I couldn't get up, you knew there was something wrong. That was only a habit, I suppose, but Gillian was brilliant, and she was part of my life for every injury I got. So she probably knows more about rehabilitating and living with someone that's injured than most people in the world. But recoveries they definitely got harder as you get older, there's no doubt. I had access to a brilliant facility in Santry, and again, the King was an amazing physio. I had great doctors always as well, the late Brendan Doyle, and brilliant surgeons to go with it. But injury was just part of it, and it was how quick could you fix it. And I definitely, the older I got and the more aware the girls became, that wasn't great either. Hobbling around on crutches with kids, that wasn't nice for them.
Are you thinking to yourself of the effect it could have on them? I mean, for example, would you be hell-bent on them not being jockeys now, or is it something that would ever even of interest to them?
If they wish to ride horses, of course I will help them and encourage them in every way that I can. Would I force them into doing it? Definitely not. But I wouldn't stop them. And if whatever path they choose to go in life, I hope I'll be able to help them.
Would it be a bit easier if they didn't go down that road?
Personally, I would be loving if was a doctor, a dentist, a solicitor and a barrister amongst them, but that's probably unlikely.
And what about the mental side of it, Ruby, from not just injuries, but from another point of view as well? Because mental health is something that's been talked about more and more, not just in racing, but in society as a whole these days. What about the psychological effect on you when you're not able to do the job you want to do, you're moping around the house here? How much does that get you down?
Of course it does, but I'd say every human has good days and bad days. There's no doubt about that, and things can go wrong for everybody. But that doesn't mean that you have to think, poor me. I never thought, poor me. All right, I would get hurt, and for a week, yeah, I would be like the world had ended. But life has to go on. So probably got a kick in the rear end from Gillian and got sent on my way, but he just had to. And even the last time I broke my leg, she got the hand controls put on the car. I'd say just to get me out of here, get you going. You know, I was lucky to have someone standing beside me or behind me. But mental health is a huge thing, but people have to help themselves as well. You have to get up and get on with it. And having the poor me attitude, that's no good. You can't think poor me. It's when something goes wrong, instead of who am I going to blame, it's how do I fix it? That's the way I look at things. I don't blame who, so what, it's done. I want the answer, I want the fix.
And continuing that theme, I just want to talk about the last couple of years of your career, because it was almost a stigma that was kind of attached to you. You had a few falls at the last fence or the last hurdle in high-profile races on high-profile horses. Annie Power, I suppose, was one that people will always remember. And people were talking about it. A lot of people were talking about it, going to the races, online, social media now as well. You had to be aware of it. I know you were aware of it. And when you had a fall at the last, I could see sometimes when you walked away in your face, you were thinking, I can't believe this has happened again. I mean, how tough was that for you to deal with that, knowing people were talking so much about this, and to keep it out of your head and go out there, put it to the back of your mind?
I never rode any differently, always. And I suppose I had a coach in my father before anybody did. And I never rode any differently. I might think, how did that happen again? But I looked at them all, and I looked at every race I rode in, watch a replay. Why did the fall at the third, the fifth, the last? Why did that finish second? Most times I would know when I pulled up what I had did wrong. And I could get up from the back of the fence and think, like, how did he lay down? But I probably never rode not to lose. I always rode to win. And I always kept the pressure on. I never slowed down. I always kept the pressure on. And I would sit down and look at the whatever amount of horses that fell. But I could sit here and rattle out the amount of horses that won, which way outnumbers the ones that fell, because I never backed off. To me, second was nowhere. I just kept the pressure on, and that was the way I rode. I didn't ride the last fence any different to the first fence. I just kept the pressure on and let the horse make his own decision.
And how hard was it to block out what was going on? I mean, people were pulling out statistics, talking about you being in contention so often and so forth. I guess when you're in the public eye, you're going to get that sort of forensic examination, but at the same time, it doesn't make it any easier for you, I guess, does it?
No, but if you're going to read the praise, you have to read the criticism, and I probably never read that much of either. So to me, it didn't. What people were saying online, yeah, I knew I was getting plenty of stick, but I didn't know who those people were. I didn't know who they were. They were whatever, whoever they were. I couldn't tell you who they were, so that didn't really mean anything to me. Once I would look at my father and say, well, what did I do wrong there? Or say to Willie, well, and they would say, no, sure, it should have done that, or no, that was unlucky, or, you know, there was the opinions of the people that I trusted was what I wanted. What everyone else was saying, that's their own opinion. It didn't really have that much of an effect on me. I didn't know any of those people, so I don't really care what they were saying. Like, that's, social media has become prominent, but sure, it's barroom talk. That's what people have always been discussing in pubs, giving out about you and slating you. You're a great lad today, you're a terrible lad the next day. That's always been society, and only you can see it now because it's on social media, but you wouldn't walk into a pub and listen to the conversation. So why read it online?
I mean, what about the younger generation though? I mean, you've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, so to speak. How tough is it for these young guys who are coming along now and know that they're going to be subject to a torrent of abuse if they get something wrong on the track?
Yeah, but if you're going to flick on to social media or to buy the papers to read the good stuff about yourself, then you're going to have to read the bad stuff. So if you don't want to know about the bad stuff, don't read the good stuff. You have to go looking for it. So don't go looking for the good, you won't find the bad. And that's there, but that's for every sports person. That's just not a phenomenon in racing. That is the Irish rugby team at the moment. It is the Kilkenny hurlers, the Limerick hurlers. How did Kenny beat them? That is sport. That when you're in the public domain and people are going to have an opinion on what you do, but it's what that opinion means to you. That opinion meant very little to me. So that's how you deal with it. If you want to be patted on the back and told you're a great fella, then read it, but you're going to get abuse too, so you'll have to read that as well.
Let's talk about the end of your career, because happily you went out at the top, winning the Punchestown Gold Cup on Mccoy. When you get to your late 30s, people are always going to start asking questions about when is the right time to hang up your boots. How much thought did you give that decision, and when did Punchestown become the likely point where you were going to wrap it up?
I think when I broke my leg on Let's Dance, I was thinking, when I get over this, I don't want to be here again. I don't want to go through this again. So came back to Cheltenham, rode 2 winners on the first day and thought, I get to the end of the season, this will be great. And then broke my leg off album photo. So
when you say get to the end of the season and finish?
Yeah, and finish, yeah. So I broke my leg, and I was always thinking, I always had in my head that I would, as stupid as it sounds, that I would beat injury wouldn't beat me. So I came back from that broken leg at the start of last season. I was thinking, get to the end of the season and that'll be it. And I was flying, I was making inroads on Paul and Rachel, and I got a fall in Killarney of hurdler Willie's, and I broke a vertebrae somewhere. Kept saying I saw ribs, but I hadn't. I broke a vertebrae, and I was thinking, if I say I'm after breaking something else, then I'll be retiring me again. So I just said nothing, and I was out for 6 or 8 weeks. So when I came back, then the thoughts of being champion jockey were gone. Paul had a chance of chasing down Rachel, but I was thinking, I'll ride a couple of big winners, and if at the end of the season, this will be it for me. I kind of fancied Rathvinden from a long way out in the English National, so I'd said to Gillian that was the target. I was aiming at the English National. I said, if he wins, I'll go out in the English National. If he doesn't, I'll keep going to Punchestown.
I mean, the official line was when you came back, yourself and Paul were kind of sharing the rides. Paul was going for the championship. Were you happy enough to kind of step aside to some extent?
I wasn't. Of course I was. It didn't suit me, but it was the right thing to do. I couldn't be champion jockey. There wasn't enough of racing left for me to actually catch up and beat Rachel. And Paul was in a position whereby he could. So, yeah, it was, I wouldn't say I did it straight off my bat, but when I thought about it, I thought, yeah, that's the right thing to do.
So champion jockey was as important to you then as it had ever been, was it?
You'd like to, yeah. I was 12 times champion, and to be champion was always nice. I didn't set my stall out all my life to be champion, but when you were in a position, yeah, of course it's nice to be champion in anything. And Paul was the one in a position to achieve that. I wasn't. So yeah, I was a little bit in the back seat for most of the season, but there was a lot of big winners and the big races. I was riding them.
Mccoy was the horse who you went out on. When was that particular race chosen? You had it in your mind at Punchestown, but was the fact that he won, you were booked for rides obviously later on in that card?
Oh yeah, weren't you? Yeah, I was, and I was down for the next day, and obviously there was a couple of 48-hour decks in Punchestown, so I was declared for Friday. I was declared on Mellon in the champion hurdle even. But no, I'd said to Gillian, we discussed it, and I'd said I wanted to ride Mccoy, I wanted to ride in that race, and I said to her, look, if all else fails, Benny the Jew is a banker on Saturday. But I said from Wednesday onwards, if I ride a Grade 1 winner, I'll bow out. So we have the ace in the pack there at the bottom. Benny is back there on Saturday.
And Willie knew nothing about it?
Didn't say anything, no, didn't tell him. He didn't need to know. Willie had enough things going on. He was under enough pressure, Punchestown week, the amount of runners he has. He didn't need to be standing in the stand wondering whether my mind was in the stand beside him or my mind was on the job. So there was no need to tell him. And
we all saw your reaction when you crossed the line on Mccoy. What was the overriding emotion? Was it joy? Was it relief?
Joy. I'd had a brilliant career. I had been so lucky to ride the horses I rode, and I'm sure I will miss the big days, there's no doubt about that, but I won't miss the rest of it. And you can't be a bit part player. You can't decide that, I'm going to ride in Down Royal because it's a Grade 1, and I'm going to ride at the Ladbroke Trophy, and I'm going to ride at Leopardstown at Christmas. You're either a jockey or you're not. You can't be a part-time jockey. And to me, I was ready to do something else. Of course the big days will be different, but I was ready to do something else every other day.
And what was Willie's reaction when you told him? There was so many people in the winners' enclosure at Punchestown that day. Obviously a big number of the owners were there, a lot of media, a lot of cameras, what have you. And you just, I think, had a little quiet word before the pandemonium broke out. What was his response?
He stood there and he looked at me and then he went, and he just said, thanks.
In true Willie Mullins fashion.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Thanks. That was it. Yeah.
Was he shocked, do you think, or had he maybe felt it was
said,
coming?
He said after he thought maybe if Rat Vindal had won when he saw Gillian and the kids there, that it was crossing my mind, but in typical Willie Mullins fashion, he'd forgotten about that as well. But yeah, look, it was magic. It was a fairy tale ending for me. I was lucky enough to get the fairy tale ending. A lot of people don't, but it worked out well in the end.
And you've alluded to it there. I mean, I have a fair idea of the answer to this, having worked on track with you a bit in the intervening period. But has there been any point in the 6 months or so that have passed where you've thought to yourself, I wish I was out there today?
Not yet, but there probably will. Leopardstown on Christmas or Cheltenham, King George, you know, there will be, of course there will, I'm human. But I don't miss the run of the mill. And as I said, Gary, you can't be a part-time jockey.
And how much preparation had gone into looking at what was going to come after your riding? I mean, you've slipped into a media role quite seamlessly. Radio, TV, you did a bit of writing for the Examiner as well. Was that always in your mind that you wanted to be able to move quickly from one to another?
I don't like being idle. I was always, work was instilled in me to work and to be able to work. So, yeah, but I suppose the contracts I had whilst I was riding, like with Racing TV, with the Examiner, with Paddy Power, and I've expanded them, I suppose, a bit, but I'd had good relationships with good companies throughout my riding career, and I was fortunate enough to have something to slip into straight away.
And how have you found it? I mean, most people would agree you're a forthright individual. You're not afraid to call it as you see it, and you've ruffled a few feathers with your former colleagues already, I know. Is that something you're going to keep on doing? Is that the way you feel you have to play it?
Yeah, I'm not a jockey anymore. I'm a pundit now, and you can't be both. And there are feathers I will ruffle, and there are egos I will inflate. But mine is my opinion, and when I do ruffle the feathers of a former colleague, it will be factually correct what I'm saying. So they can take the hump, but what I say will be factually spot on.
And what about from the family point of view? I mean, you've got, I suppose, a bit more of a routine with Gillian and the girls. Now, I know you're still riding out for Willie Mullins as well, which we shouldn't neglect. You're a big part of the team down there still, aren't you?
I enjoy it, but I suppose I'm institutionalised. Can't walk away from it just that quick. But
so you do have something in common with Mccoy.
But yeah, Gillian and the girls, I probably thought that, or hope maybe I might be around a bit more than I am, but that would all work itself out. But they're wonderful. Sure, I think they were a bit shocked when I retired as well. The girls were. I think Gillian was delighted, but I think Isabel and Elsa were a bit shocked. Took them a bit of a while to get over it, come to terms with it.
And as things stand, Ruby, just in finishing up, what's your feeling on the state of racing at the moment? I mean, as I say, you're not short of opinions. How do you feel this sport can move forward? It's taken its fair share of criticism in recent times. What's your feeling on the overall state of play, and what can we do to make it better?
I think we're lucky now. Racing is a wonderful product, but it has to be viewed as one product, and I think it has to work together to make it as good a show as it can for viewers, for punters, for owners, for spectators who go racing. I think the whole show has to be tightened up and better coordinated, and to showcase itself for the product it is. And it sounds crazy, but the racing in Ireland and England is so intertwined, and it should line up better. One needs the other for competition, and I just think it could be showcased so much smoother and better than it is.
You've been quite vocal recently regarding the congestion with fixtures both here in Ireland and in Britain. A lot of races of late, often on high profile days, have been forced to clash with races elsewhere. What do you feel can be done to improve this situation so that we can enjoy more and more of these big races in their entirety?
Well, I don't think clashes will ever be eradicated. There are days when it's just not possible to even attempt that. But I think at the majority of race meetings, especially Monday to Friday, I think moving away from the time frame that we have, racing on the hour and at 5, 10, 15 minutes, if we move to odd numbers, I think there should be 4 race meetings every afternoon at an 8-minute interval. In the summertime there can be 4 more in the evening, and even in the winter time with our floodlit tracks, those all-weather meetings should be in the evening after the 4 afternoon meetings. I think you can structure it a lot better. I think 8 minutes between races would work a lot better than the way we're going about it. I think having 35 and 40-minute intervals for racecourse at a racecourse is too long. It's okay at Royal Ascot or Cheltenham at a big festival, but at a run-of-the-mill meeting, it's time consuming. It gets tiring, to tell you the truth. It's boring between races. That's such a long space of time. And I think if we structure it, if the racecourses, BHA, HRI, whoever else it is, I think if they look at it logistically and sort it out, they can make the product an awful lot more enjoyable for everybody.
It's obviously very frustrating for the race courses involved and sponsors, etc. as well. I mean, does it really get to you when you're sitting at home here on an afternoon watching racing and a big race is on and it's clashing with something that you can't enjoy to the full?
Of course it does, but you saw it in Thurles yesterday, Gary, when there was a long delay for an air ambulance, how much time they were able to make up. The last race started nearly on time. Having had a 25-minute delay in the middle of the card, they were able to make it up. I see it more so in Ireland because I probably know the guys better, but we run Limerick on Munster National Day, and Paddy Graffin started every race on time. Val O'Connell had them out on the track, Paddy Graffin started them. It can be done. You will get the inevitable delays, a loose horse, an injured rider, a spread shoe, tack. There will be delays that nobody can control. They will happen, so you have to forgive that. But I think if it was structured better in that the start times were spread more evenly, I think it would give the race courses and each race a better opportunity to be showcased.
Fascinating as ever, Ruby. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, Gary.